say in your mind, say to yourself, I am more than my physical body. Because I am more than physical matter, I can perceive that which is greater than the physical world. I deeply desire to expand, to experience, to know, to understand, to control, to use such greater energies and energy systems as may be beneficial and constructive to me and to those who follow me. I deeply desire the help and cooperation, the assistance, the understanding of those individuals whose wisdom, development, and experience are equal to or greater than my own. I ask their guidance and protection from any influence or any source that might provide me with less than my stated desires.
Do not know all the answers to the questions about reality. Do not claim to know the ultimate truth about fire. I seek that which has been made hidden as a part of a family amongst lords of consciousness. I'm the void one.
Welcome to Lighting the Void.
We're all broadcasting live on the Fringe FM, KTOK Digital Broadcasting. This is Lighting the Void. I'm your host, Joe Roop. And we are live on the radio station, also live on YouTube and Twitch. I tried to go live on Rumble, but I'm having issues with it still, so y'all have to bear with me until I figure that out. I got it to go live. This is too bright, isn't it? I feel like I'm in like Saturday Night Fever or something. Someone told me to use this big, use the big purple lights. That's what they said. They're like, if you do it tonight, don't you have something that's more like, if you're watching on YouTube, purple lights? And it's just blinding me looking at it. So I'm going to change it. Going to change it.
I don't like the lights. I don't like them. Okay.
Turn that off. That was fun. So tonight I wanted to get into some deep occult stuff. Deep stuff. What's up, Jess? What's up, Genevieve? Michael, got your t-shirts. Good, man. Send me those pics. I want to see you and your lovely wife in those void walking t-shirts. That way we can add to the slideshow. Yeah, I've noticed that I don't ever wear LTV anything, right? I should at some point. I'm not much for self-promotion. I go around and looks like my 6th grade. Yeah, it does, right? Like someone said, oh, this is cool. This ain't cool. Not to me. It's too bright, man. We're at night. So let's go back to the moon. Do you want the moons or the mountains? Let's go to the moon. We're going to get into the deep occult tonight. A short manuscript that I think is important for everybody that wants to know some deeper secrets, or they claim to know some super deep secrets about Freemasonry and all this stuff. This was written by Manly P. Hall, which is a favorite researcher, author of mine, and yours too, probably. But we need to be reminded of this sometimes. And there's two that I want to put out for free on YouTube. I'm sure other people have read it, but we haven't read it. The way we do it is we talk about it and we read it. And this one is called, it's short. I don't know if I'll be able to get through all of it tonight, but most of it. It's called The Occult Anatomy of Man. So the hidden parts, the occult stuff of the human body. I've had the door open in the shack. I've been fighting chickens, mosquitoes, freaking grasshoppers, you name it. So if something flies by, whatever, let's get this thing going. Oh yeah, if you can support the Fringe FM, please do so. The site's back up. Thank God the site's back up. You guys, you can get shirts there too. We're going to put more stuff in the store, man. But like nowadays, you can make anything. So if you want us to make something that you would like to put in there, within reason, Trismegistus, wherever you're at, within reason. If you want us to make something that you would like with a logo on it, then we'll put it on there. Did I say hi to everybody? Hi to my one or two viewers over in Twitch. Very loyal guy you are. And I think I fixed the ringer. So if anybody wants to test that, you can call in if you got something you want to say about like last night's shows. Pretty tough show. I've been talking about it all day with everybody. Like most people didn't even know, and that was the point. Like it's been long enough, and I think everybody should know so we could pay our respects. And give them a good send off. So, The Occult Anatomy of Man, the human body and symbolism. And it's not just men, but women too, right? So in Scripture, we're told that God made man in his own image in Scripture. It is so stated not only in the Christian Bible, but also in the holy writings of nearly all enlightened people. The Jewish patriarchs taught that the human body was the microcosm or little cosmos, made in the image of the macrocosm or the great cosmos. This analogy between the finite and the infinite is said to be one of the keys by the aid of which the secrets of Holy Writ are unlocked. Now keep in mind that Manly P. Hall talks about this quite a bit. I'm smoking, I don't care, I'm stressed today. I feel like crap. So Manly P. Hall talks about this quite a bit. So he talks about how there's 7 different books in the Bible. And if you read enough, you'll get this hint where he talks about this, where there's stories that unlock secrets. The Bible has anatomy in it. It has, or I think he says biology, astrology, chemistry, all that stuff. I'm probably saying it all wrong, but there's stuff that you can unlock. But instead of that, we'll just read about it. Just get down to the secrets. So there's no doubt that the Old Testament is a physiological and anatomical textbook to those capable of reading it from a scientific viewpoint. So the functions of the human body, the attributes of the human mind, and the qualities of the human soul have been personified by the wise men of the ancient world, and a great drama has been built around their relationships to themselves and to each other. To the great Egyptian demigod, Hermes, the human race owes its concept of the law of analogy. The great Hermetic axiom was, y'all know it, got to know it by now, right? That which is above is like unto that which is below, and that which is below is like that unto which is above. Those terrible devil words. He didn't put that in there. So the religions of the ancient world were all based upon nature worship. Remember that. Which in a degenerated form has survived to our own clay as phallicism. The worship of the parts and the functions of the human body began in the later Lemurian period. I like how he talks about Atlantis and Lemuria like it's a fact. He's not even questioning it here. This is P. Hall. During the Atlantean epoch, this religion gave place to sun worship, but the new faith incorporated into it doctrines, many of the rituals and symbols of the previous belief. The building of temples in the form of the human body is a custom common to all peoples. The tabernacle of the Jews, the great Egyptian temple of Karnak, the religious structures of the Hawaiian priests, and the Christian churches laid out in the form of the cross are examples of this practice. If the human body were laid out with arms spread in the shape of any of these buildings, it would be found that the high altar would occupy the same relative position in the building that the brain occupies in the human body. All the priests of the ancient world were anatomists. Do you believe that? Nobody ever told you that, right? All the ancient world priests were anatomists. Thank God they found tobacco. It relieved stress and anxiety. It used to be a prescription. They recognized that all the functions of nature were reproduced in miniature in the human body. They therefore used man as the textbook, teaching their disciples that to understand man was to understand the universe. These wise men believed that every star in the heavens, every element in the earth, and every function in nature was represented by a corresponding center, pole, or activity within the human body. So, when the Egyptians were, digging stuff out of human bodies, they weren't just conducting science experiments. In a sense, they were, but there was some deep study going on there. The correlation between nature without and the nature of man within, which was concealed from the multitudes, hidden from the multitudes in secret, formed the secret teachings of the ancient priestcraft. Religion in Atlantis and Egypt was taken much more seriously than it is today. Can you imagine that? It was the very life of the peoples. The priests had complete control over the millions of ignorant men and women who had been taught since childhood that these robed and bearded patriarchs were direct messengers from God. And it was believed that any disobedience to the commands of the priest would bring down upon the offender's head the wrath of the Almighty. The temple depended for its maintenance upon its secret wisdom, which gave its priests control over certain powers of nature and made them vastly superior in wisdom and understanding to the laity whom they controlled. I'm going to misspell something. I have a couple of grammar Nazis out there that really want to be a pain in my ass, right? Like, they get mad because I put a punctuation somewhere. Like, can you imagine freaking out about that? If someone put a comma somewhere that they didn't like and they just freak out about it. All right, anyways. So these wise ones realized that there was a great deal more involved in religion than the chanting of mantras and the singing of hymns. They realized that the path of salvation could be walked successfully only by those who had practical, scientific knowledge of the occult function of their own bodies. The anatomical symbolism which they evolved in order to perpetuate this understanding has come down to modern Christianity, but the keys to it apparently have been lost. It is a tragic situation for religionists that they are surrounded by hundreds of symbols which they cannot understand. But it is still sadder. Yeah, that's right, you grammar Nazi. Manly P. Hall said sadder. It is still sadder that they have even forgotten that these symbols ever had any meaning other than the foolish interpretations of which they themselves had concocted. I don't know how old he was when he was writing this, but he's not happy at religion right now. So the idea prevalent in the minds of Christians that their faith is the one and only true inspired doctrine and it came parentless into the world is unreasonable in the extreme. A study of comparative religion proves beyond doubt that Christianity has begged, borrowed, or stolen its philosophies and concepts from the religions and philosophies of the ancient and medieval pagan worlds. Oh, dear God, no, don't say that. Among the religious symbols and allegories which belonged to the world long ago before the coming of Christianity are a few to which we would like to call to your attention. The following Christian symbols are concepts. These concepts are of pagan origin. Foist, they were pagan. The Christian cross comes from Egypt and India. The triple mitre from the faith of the Mithraics, the shepherd's crook from the Hermetic mysteries in Greece, the Immaculate Conception from India, the Transfiguration from Persia, and the Trinity of the Brahmins. The Virgin Mary as the Mother God is found in a dozen different faiths, and these are over 20 crucified worlds. There are over 20 crucified world saviors. The church steeple is an adaptation of Egyptian obelisks and pyramids, while the Christian devil is the Egyptian typhon with certain modifications. I'm assuming this is preempting the occult, the anatomy. So the deeper ones go into the problem, the more he realizes that there is nothing new under the sun. Ecclesiastes. That's one of my favorite books in the Bible, by the way. A truly sincere study of the Christian faith proves beyond all doubt that it is the evolutionary outgrowth of primitive doctrines. So here he's saying, he's not bashing Christianity. Here's what he's saying, that Christianity is actually an evolutionary growth of old doctrines. There is an evolution in religion as well as in physical form. If we accept and incorporate into our doctrines the religious symbolism of nearly 40 peoples, it behooves us to understand, at least in part, the meaning of the myths and allegories which we borrow, lest we be more ignorant than those from whom we secured them. Okay, so this is devoted to the problem of explaining the relationship existing between the symbolism of the ancient priests and the occult functions of the human body. We must first understand that all sacred writings are supposed to be sealed with 7 seals. In other words, it requires 7 complete interpretations to understand fully the meaning of these ancient philosophic revelations, which we have liked to call Holy Writ. Scripture is not intended to be historical. Those who understand its literal meaning understand the least of its meaning. I wonder what the orthodoxy folk would say about that. You can call in if you don't agree, but you're arguing with Manly P. Hall, not me. He could be wrong just because he's like famous or whatever. It is a well-known fact that Shakespeare, for dramatic reasons, brought together in his plays characters who had actually lived hundreds of years apart. But Shakespeare was not writing history, he was penning drama. The same is true of the Bible. Scripture leaves historians hopelessly involved in self-contradictory chronological tables where the majority of historians will remain until the judgment day. Scripture furnishes excellent subject matter for debates and also grounds for hair-splitting over the meaning of terms and probable locations of unknown cities. And many of the biblical landmarks now pointed out by guides were named hundreds of years after the birth of Christ by pilgrims. What is that? There's a mosquito, I think. By pilgrims who suspect them of occupying sites somewhere near those mentioned in the Bible. All this may prove convincing to some, but to the thinker, it is conclusive evidence that history is the least important part of Scripture. Man, you guys aren't going to get all like upset at this, right? I hope not, because this is cool shit. So when the Empress Helena, mother of Constantine the Great, visited Jerusalem in 326 AD, she discovered that not only all traces of Christianity had already been lost, but that a temple dedicated to the goddess Venus stood on the hill now accepted as Mount Calvary. Less than 400 years after the death of Christ, there was apparently no one in the Holy Land who had ever heard of him. This does not necessarily imply that he never lived, but it certainly does indicate that the halo of miracles and supernatural atmosphere with which modern Christianity envelops him are largely mythological. Like all other religions, the Christian faith accumulated a weird collection of fantastic legends which are its own worst enemies. For they have taken the simple moralist of Nazareth, the man who loved his fellow creatures, and built around him a superstructure of idolatry which loves no one and serves only itself. Idolatry. I said that wrong. So, I'm just a messenger here. I'm just a messenger. As Buddha in India merely reformed the Brahmin concepts of his day, so Jesus reshaped the faith of Israel and gave to his disciples and the world a doctrine based upon that which had gone before, but remodeled to meet the needs of the people who surrounded him and the problems which confronted the Jewish nation. The Essenes, hear this part, right? These are my favorite people that I like to try to study are the Essenes. The Essenes who educated Jesus were of Egyptian or Hindu origin, and his faith incorporated the best of that which had gone before. Now, just because Manly P. Hall's saying it doesn't mean it's fact, but if you really do some studying, and I know Coach Chris would agree on this, like there's some real stuff about the Essenes that are pretty interesting. The records preserved of him are largely allegorical, and the simple man is plunged by them into a great sea of supernaturalism. This was not entirely without purpose, however, for as Shakespeare took license with history in order to present essential truths, so it seems the historians of Jesus used the character of the man as the groundwork of a great drama. He becomes the hero of a seven-sealed story, and those Christians who have studied symbolism can gain from that story the key to the true Christian mysteries. They will then realize that Scripture is perpetual history, that it pertains to no nation or people, but is the story of all nations and people, not the chosen. Oh, Lord, what have we done? It is a wonderful thing, for example, to study the life of Christ in the light of astronomy, for he becomes the sun and his disciples the 12 signs of the zodiac. Among the constellations we find the scenes of his ministry, and in the procession of the equinoxes, the story of his birth, growth, maturity, and death for men. Again, the tortured chemicals in the retort further reveal to us the life of the master, for with the key to chemistry, with the key to chemistry, the scriptures become another book. There's a crazy chemistry book in there, right? Somewhere. In this particular work, however, we can only concern ourselves with the relationship of these allegories to the human body. So we're not going to do the chemistry thing. We're just going to talk about the body. We discover that the life of Christ, as found in the Gospels, has been conventionalized until it agrees perfectly with the lives of dozens of world saviors, for all of them are also astronomical and physiological myths. All these myths come to us out of the most remote antiquity, where the primitive races used the human body as the symbolic unit, and the gods and demons were personified out of the organs and functions of the body. Among certain Kabbalistic writers, the Holy Land is mapped out on the human body, and the various cities are shown as centers of consciousness in man. There's a wonderful study here for those who will investigate deeply and sincerely the ancient mysteries. We cannot hope to cover all the ground, but if you gain from this booklet a key to the situation, we hope you will pursue the line of thought until you have made it all inclusive and opened at least one seal of the book of divine revelation. Oh, that's a whole other thing we can get into too, because if you really look into like when the book of Revelations was added to like all the other books, it can get hairy on either end, really. All right, so let's get into the three worlds, part 2. So according to the mystery schools, the human body is divided into 3 major parts, and in analogy with this, the universe without is said to be composed of 3 worlds, heaven, earth, and hell. Heaven is the superior world, and for some unknown reason is supposed to be above. Although Ingersoll proved conclusively that owing to the rotation of the earth, up and down are always changing places. Nearly all religions teach that God dwells in the heavens. Nearly all religions. Their members are taught to believe that God is above them, so they raise their hands in prayer and lift their eyes to the heavens when they implore or petition him. Among some nations, he is supposed to dwell on the tops of mountains, which are the highest places of the world. Wherever he is and whenever he is, his place of domicile is above, overshadowing the world below. Between heaven above and hell beneath is earth, which the Scandinavians call Midgard, or the Middle Garden. It is suspended in space and forms the dwelling place of men and other living creatures. It is connected to the heavens by a rainbow bridge down which the gods descend. And remember when he's saying this stuff, like it's not just Scandinavian stuff. The rainbow bridge is a lot of other stuff too. Its volcanic craters and fissures are said to connect it with hell, the land of darkness and oblivion. Here, twixt heaven and earth dominion wielding, as Goethe said, exists nature. The green grass, the flowing rivers, the mighty ocean exist only in the middle world, which is a sort of neutral ground where the hosts of good and evil fight their eternal battle of Armageddon. Oh man, I hope I can get through all of this. This is good stuff. Below, in the darkness and flames, torment and suffering, is the world of hell, which we have interpreted as hell. He spells it with 1 L, interpreted with 2 L's. It is the great beneath, for as surely as we think of heaven as up, we think of hell as down, while the middle place, earth, seems to be the dividing line between them. And hell are the forces of evil, the tearing, rending, destroying powers, which are always bringing sorrow to the earth, and which struggle untrendingly to overthrow the throne of the gods in heaven. Y'all ready for this? Man. The entire system is an anatomical myth. For the heaven world of the ancients, the dome temple on the top of the mountain was the skull with its divine contents. This is the home of the gods and man. It is termed up because it occupies the northern end of the human spine. The temple of the gods, who rule the earth, is said to be at the North Pole, which also, by the way, is the home of Santa Claus, because the North Pole represents the positive end of the spinal column of the planetary lord. Santa Claus, coming down the chimney with his sprig of evergreen, or the Christmas tree, at the season of the year when nature is dead, has a fine Masonic interpretation for those who wish to study it. The same is true of the manna that descendeth to feed the children of Israel in the wilderness, for this manna is a substance which comes down the spinal cord from the brain. The Hindus symbolize the spine as the stem of the sacred lotus. Therefore, the skull and the contents are symbolized by the flower. The spinal column is Jacob's ladder connecting heaven and earth, while its 33 segments are the degrees of masonry and the number of years of the life of Christ. Up these segments, the candidate ascends in consciousness to reach the temple of initiation located on the top of the mountain. It is in this doomed room with a hole in the floor, the foramen magnum, that the great mystery initiations are given. The Himalaya mountains rise above the earth, representing the shoulders and the upper half of the body. They are the highest mountains of the world, and somewhere upon their summit stands the temple, resting like the heavens of the Greeks upon the shoulders of Atlas. It is interesting to note that Atlas is the upper vertebra of the human spine upon which I guess it's condyles, is that how you say that? Condyles of the skull rest. In the brain there are a number of caves or ventricles and folds, and in them, according to Eastern legends, live the wise men, the yogis, and the hermits. The caves of the yogis are said to be located at the head of the Ganges River, and every religion has its sacred river. To the Christians, it is the Jordan. To the Egyptians, it is the Nile, while to the Hindus, it is the Ganges. The sacred river is the spinal canal, which has its source among the peaks of the mountains. The holy men in their retreats represent the spiritual sight in the human brain and are the 7 sleepers of the Quran who must remain in the darkness of their caves until the spirit revitalizes them. The brain is the upper room referred to in the Gospels where Jesus met with his disciples, and it is as the upper room. I was thinking about that. You know, and he's talking about the verse where it says, when you see the man holding a pitcher of water come into the upper room, and I'll be there, or whatever, depending on which version you're reading. So yeah, the brain is the upper room referred to in the Gospels where Jesus met with his disciples, and it is said that the disciples themselves represent the 12 convolutions of the brain. It is these 12 convolutions which later send their messages by means of the nerves into the body below to convert the Gentiles or preach the gospel in the Middle Earth. These 12 convolutions gather around the central opening in the brain, the third ventricle, which is the Holy of Holies, the mercy seat, where between the spreading wings of the angels Jehovah talks with the high priest, and where both day and night the Shekinah's glory hovers. From this point also the spirit finally ascends from Golgotha, which is the place in the skull. It is a clairvoyant fact that the spirit not only leaves but also enters the body through the crown of the head, probably giving rise to the story of Santa Claus and his chimney. The Trinity in man lives in the 3 great chambers of the human body, from which they radiate their power throughout the 3 worlds. These centers are the brain, the heart, and the reproductive system. Remember that? Also, the moon, the sun, and the stars. These are the three main chambers of the pyramid, and also the rooms in which he's got a lot of damn typos in here, and also the rooms which are given the entered apprentice, the fellowcraft, and the master mason's degrees of Blue Lodge Masonry. In these three chambers dwell the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, who are symbolized by the three-letter word Om, A-U-M. Om. You ever do that for a long time? You just chant Om forever. I'm sure some of you have. You'll start to vibrate your own pineal gland if you do it long enough. The transmutation, regeneration, and unfoldment of these three great centers results in the sounding of the lost word, which is the great secret of the Masonic order. From the spinal nerves comes impulses and life forces which make this possible. Therefore, the Mason is told to consider carefully his substitute word, which means the marrow of the bone. In the cerebellum, or posterior brain, which has charge of the motive system of the human body and is the only brain developed in the animal, is to be found a little tree-like growth, which has long been symbolized by a sprig of acacia, and such is referred to in the Masonic allegory. Yeah, keep doing that. Just keep going. Yeah, go for it. Yeah, you don't really, I mean, if you want to shortcut it, I guess you can do DMT, but the natural one's better. Just saying. I think it is. What do I know, though? This studio. The two lobes of the cerebrum. The two lobes of the cerebrum were called by the ancients Cain and Abel, and have much to do with the legend of the curse of Cain, which is literally the curse of unbalance. Unbalance. Remember, you remember all the stuff we talked about. For the murder of the spirit of equilibrium, Cain is sent forth a wanderer upon the face of the earth. I have in my possession, this is really creepy, by the way. Listen to this. I have in my possession a very remarkable skull, which originally rested on the shoulders of a homicide. What the hell is Manly P. Hall doing with a skull? This was a guy that was murdered, and I have his skull. It is of high organic quality, but bears the curse of Cain. This individual had a grudge which he nursed very carefully. Nursed grudges sometimes become very dangerous things. Yeah, so let go of your resentments. This person swore that when he met a certain man, he would cut his heart out and throw it in his face. A number of years passed, and his hatred grew. And at last, meeting his enemy, he attacked him and fulfilled his threat. He was hanged for the crime, but the skull bearing the testimony to the brain reveals a very interesting fact. The right half of the brain is under the control of Mercury, the planet of intelligence, and as a result of the crossing of the brain nerves at the base of the skull, it rules the left side of the body. The left half of the brain, under the control of Mars, the spirit of anger and impulse, rules the right side of the body and likewise the strong right arm. And as a result of his hatred and the rulership of Mars, which grew out of that hatred, the left rear side of the brain is fully twice the size of the right. Think about that. So Manly P. Hall, let me finish this before you get into how creepy this is, all right? So the individual allowed Mars to control his nature. The impetuosity of Mars ruled him, and he paid with his life for the mark of Cain. Science knows there is a very narrow line between genius and insanity. For any dominating vice or virtue, man must pay with unbalance. Unbalance always distorts the viewpoint, and distorted viewpoints are unfailingly productive of misery. Damn. See, I like how direct he is, but think about this for a second. Some guy's getting hung out there. I guess Manly P. Hall watched it. He knows of the murder because everybody around town's talking about it. Manly P. Hall has got it in his head, or at least knows that he wants to conduct some experiments so he can prove some of this stuff, that astrology and the body and all the stuff come together, because that's what he learned in the mysteries. So he had to go up to somebody and be like, listen, when that guy gets off that rope, do you mind if I have his skull? Or actually, you know what? It could have been this way. Because that's weird, right? He probably had to dig up a damn grave to get that thing. So he had to get permission to dig up someone's grave. Now, who do you go to back then to ask for something like that? Probably a fellow Mason, I would think. So, where were we? Get out of here, you son of a bitch. In the skull is the switchboard which controls the activities of the body. Every function of man below the neck is controlled by a center of consciousness in the brain. Proof of this is the fact that injury to certain centers of the brain results in paralysis of various parts of the body. Medical science now knows that the spinal cord is an elongation of the brain. And some authorities even claim the cord to be capable of intelligence throughout its entire length. I don't know about now, but he's saying that whenever he wrote this. So the cord is the flaming sword, which is supposed to have stood at the gates of the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden is in the skull, within which is a tree bearing 12 manner of fruit. The brain is filled with vaulted chambers and passageways, which have their correspondence in the spans and arches of the temples, while the third ventricle is undoubtedly the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid. The spinal cord is the serpent of the ancients. In Central and South America, the savior god is called Quetzalcoatl. I can never say that right. Quetzalcoatl. His name means a feathered serpent, and this has always been his symbol. This is the brazen serpent raised by Moses in the wilderness. The 9 rattles on the tail of the serpent are called the number of man, and they represent the sacral and the coccygeal bones, within whose centers the secret of human evolution is contained. Every organ of the physical body is reproduced in the brain, where it can be traced by the law of analogy. There are 2 embryonic human forms, one male and the other female, twisted together in the brain. These are the yin and yang of China, the black and white dragons biting each other, and one of these figures has its organ of expression, the pineal gland, and the other the pituitary body. And these 2 ductless glands are well worth consideration, for they are very important factors in the unfolding of human consciousness. It is known that these glands are larger and more active in higher grades of mentality than in those of lower quality. And in certain congenital idiots, they are very small. Damn. Hope mine aren't small. These 2 little glands are called the head and the tail of the dragon of wisdom. They are the copper and zinc poles of an electric circuit which has the entire body as a battery. I wish I had a button. I could hit that Morpheus button right now. Matrix. Just like the Matrix said, I knew it, man. It's a simulation. We're batteries. The pituitary body, which rests in the Turcica? I'm going to call it Turcica, which rests in the cella turcica of the sphenoid bone directly behind and just a little below the bridge of the nose and connected to the third ventricle by a tiny tube. Ooh, this is a big word. Called infundibulum. This is the feminine pole, or negative center, which has charge of the expressions of physical energy. Its activity also regulates to a large degree the size and weight of the body. It is also the thermometer, revealing disorder in any other of the chain of ductless glands. Endocrinology, or the study of the ductless glands and their secretions, is still in its experimental stage, but someday it will be revealed as the most important of all medical sciences. The pituitary body is known under the following symbols by the ancient world: the alchemical retort, the mouth of the dragon, the Virgin Mary, the Holy Grail, the lunar crescent, the laver of purification, one of the cherubim of the arch, Isis of Egypt, Arada of India, and the fish's mouth. It may well be called the hope of glory of the physical man. And at the opposite end of the third ventricle and a little higher is the pineal gland, which looks not unlike a pine cone, from which it secured its name. Sir Ernest Alfred Wallace Budge, keeper of the Egyptian antiquities in the British Museum, mentions in one of his works the Egyptian custom of tying pine cones on the top of their heads. He states that in the papyri rolls, these cones are fastened to the tops of the heads of the dead when they are taken into the presence of Osiris, lord of the underworld. Undoubtedly, the symbol referred to the pineal gland. It was also the custom of certain African tribes to fasten pieces of fat to the tops of their heads and allow them to melt in the sun and run down over them as a part of their religious observances. It is interesting that the American Indian should wear his feather, which was originally symbolic of the spiritual perception, in the same place where the Christian monk shaves his head. The Hindus teach that the pineal gland is the third eye, called the eye of the Dangma. It is called by the Buddhists the all-seeing eye and is spoken of in Christianity as the eye single. You know that phrase where he says, if thine eye be single, let the whole body will fill with light, right? The single eye. So we are told that ages ago, the pineal gland was an organ of sense orientation by which man cognized the spiritual world, but that with the coming of the material senses and the two objective eyes, it ceased to be used, and during the time of the Lemurian race retreated to its present position in the brain. It is said that children, recapitulating their previous periods of evolution, have a limited use of the third eye up to their 7th year, at which time the skull bones grow together. This accounts for the semi-clairvoyant condition of children. Did you know that? That's why they have imaginary friends and can see all this crazy crap that I saw when I was little, because your bones are like open. Your spirit's kind of just waving in the wind, right? That's, I don't know, whatever. So this accounts, for the semi-clairvoyant condition of children, who are far more sensitive than adults along psychic lines. The pineal gland is supposed to secrete an oil, which is called resin, the life of the pine tree. This word is said to be involved in the origin of the Rosicrucians, who are working with the secretions of the pineal gland and seeking to open the eye single. For it is said in Scripture, quote, the light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, the whole body shall fill with light. End quote. The pineal gland is the tail of the dragon and has a tiny finger-like protuberance at one end. This gland is called Joseph, for it is the father of the God-man. And the finger-like protuberance is called the staff of God, sometimes the Holy Spear. Its shape is like that evaporating vessel of the alchemist. It is a spiritual organ, which is later destined to be what it once was, namely, a connecting link between the human and the divine. The vibrating finger on the end of this gland is the rod of Jesse and the scepter of the high priest. Certain exercises, as given in the Eastern and Western mystery schools, cause this little finger to vibrate. Remember? Resulting in a buzzing or droning sound to the brain. This is sometimes very distressing, especially when the individual who experiences the phenomenon, in all too many cases, knows nothing about the experience through which he is passing. In the middle of the brain and surrounded by the convolutions is the third ventricle, a vaulted chamber of initiation, and around it sit 3 kings, the great centers of life and power, the pituitary body, the pineal gland, and the optic thalamus. In this chamber also is a small gritty seed, which is undoubtedly connected with the king's coffer in the Great Pyramid. And the third ventricle is supposed to be the seat of the soul, and the aura radiating from the heads of saints and sages is said to represent the golden glow pouring from this third ventricle. Between the eyes and just above the root of the nose is a spreading in the frontal bone of the skull, which is called the frontal sinus. The slight bulge caused by the spreading of this bone is known to phrenology as the seat of individuality. It is here that the jewels are placed on the foreheads of the Buddhas, and it is also from this point that the serpent rose from the crown of the ancient Egyptians. Several of the mystery schools teach that this is the seat of Jehovah in the human body. While his function is through the generative system, his center of consciousness as a part of the spirit of man is supposed to be located in a sea of blue ether called the Veil of Isis, and in the center, which is in the center of the frontal sinus. When clairvoyantly studying the body of man, that little point always shows up as a black dot and cannot be analyzed. So I guess what he's saying is any clairvoyants that were studying the body, like, I guess all they would see was a black dot there. Damn. Stuff's getting strange, man. Stuff's getting weird. I feel that eclipse coming on, don't you? It's coming. It's coming right over me, actually. The cross, of course, represents the human body. The upper limb of it is the head of man rising above the horizontal line of his outstretched arms. As already stated, the great churches and cathedrals of the world have been built in the form of a cross and contain, where the head should be, the altar upon which are burning lighted candles. These candles are symbolic of spiritual sense centers in the brain, while the custom of placing a rose window over the altar suggests the soft place on the top of the skull. The skull, the upper room, is the sanctum sanctorum of the Masonic temple, and to it only the pure can aspire. The winged bone, which medical science knows as the sphenoid, is the Egyptian scarab carrying in its claws the pituitary body and also bearing aloft the gleaming spark of immortality located in the frontal sinus. We are told in the ancient mythologies that the gods came down from heaven and walked with men, instructing them in the arts and sciences. In a similar way, the godlike powers in man descend from the heaven world of his brain to carry on the work of constructing and reconstructing natural substances. We are told that in the ultimate of evolution, man's body will slowly be dissolved back again into the brain, which was its origin, until nothing remains but 7 globular centers radiating 7 perfect sense perceptions, which are the spirits before the throne and the saviors which he is bringing into the world to redeem it through the 7 periods of his growth. That is the weirdest thing I've ever heard. So, in the ultimate of evolution of man's body will slowly be dissolved back into the brain, that we'll get into that later, until nothing remains but 7 globular centers radiating 7 perfect sense perceptions, not 5, 7, which are the spirits before the throne and the saviors which he is bringing into the world to redeem it through the 7 periods of his growth. So we're probably just going to go back to one big brain where we all just hang out and party, and we're just like one, like that brain thing in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I'm taking the piss. Man is an inverted plant, gaining his nourishment from the sun as the plant does from the earth. As the life of the plant ascends its stem to nourish its leaves and branches, so the life of man, rooted in the brain, descends to produce the same result. This life descending is symbolized as the world saviors who come down into the world to die for men. And later these lives are returned again to the brain, where they glorify man before all the worlds of creation. So much for the story of the brain. Now let us consider the next of man's marvelous parts, namely the spinal column. Any questions? I got a ton of questions. Like, I would have loved to have been in class, just in a room where he's saying all this stuff. I'd just sit there with my hand up, stretched, like some annoying kid about to break his arm because I got a million questions. How much time do we got here? Okay. The spinal column. Connecting the 2 worlds, heaven above and the sphere of darkness below, is the spinal column, a chain of 33 segments protecting within them the spinal cord. This ladder of bones plays a very important part in the religious symbolism of the ancients. It is often referred to as a winding road or stairway, and sometimes it is called the serpent, at other times the wand or scepter. The Hindus teach that there are 3 distinct canals or tubes in the spinal system. They call them Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna. These tubes connect the lower generative centers of the body with the brain. The Greeks symbolized them by the caduceus or winged staff of Hermes. This consisted of a long rod, or the central Sushumna, which ended in a knob or ball, or the pons of the medulla oblongata. And on each side of this knob are wings arched over, used to represent the 2 lobes of the cerebrum. Up this staff and twisted around it wind 2 serpents, one black and the other white. These represent the Ida and Pingala. The ancient Hindus have a legend concerning the goddess Kundalini, in which it is said that she descends by means of a ladder or cord from heaven to a little island floating in the great sea. And connecting this with embryology, it is evident that the ladder or cord represents the umbilical cord, while the little island is the solar plexus. And when the ladder is cut away from heaven, the goddess flees in terror to the cave, or the sacral plexus, where she hides far from the sight of men. And like Amaterasu, the Japanese goddess of the shining lace, she must be lured from her cave, for while she is there and refuses to come forth, the world is in darkness. Kundalini is a Sanskrit word meaning a serpentine or twisting gas or force. This force, so the Eastern sages claim, can be drawn up through the central spinal canal, the Sushumna, and when this essence strikes the brain, it opens the center of spiritual consciousness and inner perception, bringing with it spiritual illumination. And the system of culture whereby this is made possible is the most secret teaching of the Eastern saints. For they realize that this spiral twisting force is not only illuminating, but like the serpents, which it is a symbol, is also a deadly poison. Yeah, see, I remember someone being on the show talking about the real keys to like hermetic alchemy was dangerous. Smatterings of Eastern occultism are coming all the time into a Western world, but we are sorry to say that they are bringing with them endless suffering and sorrow for these great truths. In the hands of individuals incapable of rightly understanding or applying them, destroy intelligence and reason. Along the spine are a number of nerve ganglia and plexuses, and all these have their place in religious symbolism. For example, we are told that the early Jews called the sacral plexus and the sacrococcygeal ganglion the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. There's a small plexus in the region of the kidneys called the sagittarial plexus, which the ancients knew as the city of Tarsus, where St. Paul fought with the beasts. Higher occultism teaches that the lotus blossoms, or the nerve centers of the spine, are reflections or negative poles bearing witness of 7 great positive centers of consciousness located in the brain. These 7 function through the centers of the spine in approximately the same way that the 7 spirits before the throne function through the planetary bodies. The disciple is warned not to work with the centers upon the spine, but to labor instead with their true rulers, the centers in the brain. So there's a method to the madness of initiation and conscious ascension. We just passed all that up, though. Got our damn gallbladder taken out, though, didn't we? I'm just playing. So the wanderings of the children of Israel in the wilderness, or the pilgrimage of the Mohammedan to Mecca, the endless pilgrimages of Hindu holy men who spend their lives going from one shrine to another, represent the pilgrimage of the spirit fire, or Kundalini, through the nerve centers along the spine. By certain specifications, force is turned into these centers, one after the other, until, when seen clairvoyantly, they are great flower-like areas from which light rays stream like petals. And each of these lotus blossoms has a different number of petals according to the number of nerves which branch out from it. That would be cool if you could see that. It is said that the Logos, when the time came to create the material universe, entered a state of deep meditation, centralizing his thought power upon the 7 flower-like centers of the 7 worlds. And gradually his life force descended from the brain, which was the great superior world, and striking these flowers one after the other, waved birth to the lower worlds. When at last his spirit fire struck the lowest center of the physical world, was created, and his fire was at the base of the spine. And when the world returns to him again, and he once more becomes supreme in consciousness, it will be because he withdraws the life from these 7 centers, beginning with the lowest, and returns it again to the brain. Thus the path of evolution for all living things is to raise this fire, whose descent made their manifestation in these lower worlds possible, and whose raising brings them into harmony once more with the superior worlds. Masons just want to be gods. That's what they want to be, gods. That's so dumb when I hear that. Don't get it, man. Like everything returns to God. But it's going to be weird if it's like some alien thing, right? Like maybe we're doing this spiritual thing and making it all pretty, but when we get there, we're going to be like, no, you know, we're going to look like that dude off Ninja Turtles. This myth of life force that came down and took upon itself worlds is found among all the civilized nations of the earth. This is the Hiram Abiff who built the Masonic temple or the bodies and was then slain by the three vehicles which he formed. This is likewise the Christ slain for the sins of the world. Because of the fact that this spinal fire is a twisting serpentine force, the snake has been used in all parts of the world to represent the world's saviors. The urachus worn by the Egyptian priests upon their foreheads was symbolic of Kundalini, and the sacred cobra who, when she was raised in the wilderness, saved all who gazed upon her. Moses and the brazen serpent. As the brain is the center of the divine world, so the solar plexus is the center of the human world. For representing semi-consciousness, it links the unconsciousness below with the consciousness above. And man is not only capable of thinking with this brain, he is capable of a certain phase of thought through the nerve centers of the solar plexus. It will probably be wise at this point to describe the difference between a medium and a clairvoyant. To the average person, there is no difference. But to the mystic, these two phases of spiritual sight are separated by the entire span of human evolution. And we're going to get, so I got to do the station break, 3-4 minutes here. When we get back, he's going to talk about the difference between a clairvoyant and a medium. And we're going to keep just studying one of the seals, right? One of the seals of the teachings in Revelation, which is apparently anatomy. It's pretty fascinating stuff. I'm still kind of like creeped out that Manly P. Hall would, I don't know, dig up skulls to prove that the planetary energies are connected to the body, parts of the body through digging up bones. That's an old country song, by the way. Right. We'll be right back. You can call in too if you want. 501-777-5631. Fringe.fm. www.fringe.fm. Bumper stickers are a fun side hustle with low-cost investment that has built-in advertising to attract local customers in parking lots, rallies, gatherings, conventions, venues, and more. You could potentially sell these bumper stickers on consignment to local businesses, tattoo parlors, head shops, or any other independently owned store that might gear toward the fringe. Bumper stickers are great gift-giving ideas for friends and family. Also, a way to wake up your fellow travelers on the path without having to waste energy in tiresome debates. No car? No problem. Bumper stickers will stick to just about anything with a semi-smooth surface. Go to www.justbsme.com and get your bumper stickers today.
I was in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean when it happened. There was a sudden jolt and our submarine crashed on the seafloor. We were in total darkness.
That's Dr. Dejana Figueroa, a marine biologist and STEM teacher, talking about a deep sea dive she'll never forget.
It's funny, when I was a kid, I was afraid of the ocean, and there I was, 2 miles below the surface. But as a scientist, you prepare for that. Using our training and a little creativity, we fixed the sub and finished our experiments. The dive was just too important. Every dive gives us glimpses at things few people ever get to see. Glowing creatures, fiery undersea volcanoes. Yeah. When we got back to the surface, I kissed the ground and called my mom, of course. But you know what? I wouldn't trade that dye for anything.
Dr. Figueroa uses her passion for STEM to discover new things and make the world a better place. She can STEM, so can you. Check out She Can STEM for more stories and inspiration. A message from the ad council.
Have you ever wondered, what do the stars say for me? Or, will the next month or the next year be more favorable? How about, are our two signs compatible? Each month, at the new moon, you can ask these questions live with me, your astrologer psychic, Mary DeCina, along with host of Lighting the Void, Joe Root. Join us at the new moon for Cosmic Conditions. We look forward to working with your energy.
Every new moon at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, right here on Fringe FM.
Musicians experience a lot of frustration with music marketing and promotion. They have no idea how to get their music heard, and they're spending hours sending emails, making phone calls, and hitting up their friends to promote them. With our industry-powered digital marketing platform, we can set up your media plan in minutes. Our team will automatically distribute your music across all the best channels, so you can focus on actually making the music. Submit your music today on our website at mymusicpromoter.com. That's mymusicpromoter.com.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Listening to Lighting the Void Radio.
To Nice. All right. Y'all hear me? Yeah. All right, welcome back to Lighting the Void Radio. We are doing some occult stuff. The hidden, what is this called? The Occult Anatomy of Man by Manly P. Hall. Now, you should always question this stuff, though. Always. Manly P. Hall is a very intelligent philosopher, researcher, Freemason, all that stuff. And a good writer, and delivered a lot of good information. But it doesn't mean it. Even if it sounds awesome, it doesn't mean it's fact. But it's pretty interesting, though. I would suggest do your own research and figure this out for yourself. Like, what that means is read this book and then pull up some religious stuff to see if what he's saying goes with it, right? Because you never know. He could be tricking you, right? Like, he might have some kind of evil agenda. Take over the world. Okay, so the difference between a clairvoyant and a medium. So a clairvoyant is one who has raised the spinal serpent into the brain and by his or her growth earned the right of perceiving the invisible worlds with the aid of the third eye or pineal gland. This organ of consciousness, which millions of years ago connected man with the invisible worlds, closed during the Lemurian period when the objective senses began to develop. The occultist, however, by the process of development hinted at before, may reopen this eye and by means of it explore the invisible worlds. Clairvoyants are not born, they are made. So, according to Manly P. Hall, if you ever hear someone go, I was born a clairvoyant. Really? Mediums are not made, they are born. The clairvoyant can become such only after years, sometimes lives of self-preparation. On the other hand, the medium, by sitting in a darkened room or by other similar practices, may secure results in just a few days. The medium uses the solar plexus as a mirror, and upon its sensitive nerves are reflected pictures recorded in the invisible ethers. Through the spleen, which is the gateway to the etheric body, the medium permits decarnate intelligences to come into his spiritual constitution, the result being voices and other spirit manifestations. Automatic writing is gained by permitting the etheric arm of an outside intelligence to control temporarily the physical arm of the medium. This is not possible until the medium removes his own etheric double from the arm, or two things cannot occupy the same place at the same time. The process of periodically separating the life forces from the physical arm is very dangerous, often resulting in paralysis. All right, so if you call yourself a medium, you might get offended at this. But he's dead. You can't, whatever. Mediumship is unnatural to man, while clairvoyance is the natural result of growth and the unfolding of the spiritual nature. There are 100 mediums to one clairvoyant, and for the clairvoyant can become such only through, get out of here, some bitch. For the clairvoyant can become such only through self-mastery and the exertion of tremendous power. While the weaker, more sickly, and more nervous an individual is, the better medium he or she makes. The clairvoyant is unfolding his mind by feeling it with useful knowledge, while the first instruction, it sounds like he's got some pretty hardcore beliefs about that, right? So the reason mediumship through the solar plexus is a retrogression may be summed up as follows. The group spirits who control the destinies of the animal kingdoms govern then charges through pictures thrown against the solar plexus, for the animal has no self-conscious mind. I'll read that again because I screwed it up. The group spirits who control the destinies of the animal kingdoms govern then charges through pictures thrown against the solar plexus, for the animal has no self-conscious mind. And as a result, instead of thinking with its own brain, it thinks with the brain of the group spirit to whom it is attached by invisible magnetic cords. These cords convey their impressions and photograph them upon the sympathetic nervous system. Having no will of its own, the animal is incapable of combating these urges and consequently obeys them implicitly. Man governs himself through the cerebrospinal nervous system because he has developed individuality, and the sympathetic system no longer rules him. Opening himself to impulses through the solar plexus area, the medium is thwarting his own growth by preventing the cerebrospinal nervous system from controlling his destiny. So pretty much, if you're doing mediumship according to Manly P. Hall, you're just a puppet. Man has always liked to lean on external things. He hates to face each problem and solve it with the brain that God gave him. He consequently leans on the invisible worlds, asking them to help him to accomplish the labors which he should do by his own efforts. Thousands of people must carry the karmic responsibilities of the medium. For many follow this calling because hundreds of people want to talk to deceased relatives or get inside tips on the stock exchange. Those who by their patronage encourage things of which they do not themselves approve are personally responsible for the injury which their selfishness has thus permitted other persons to inflict upon themselves. The difference, therefore, between mediumship and clairvoyance is about half the length of the spinal column. It is the difference between negative and positive. It is the difference between the midnight of the seance room and the noonday of the temple. All of the organs within the body of man have their religious significance. The heart, with its chambers, is itself a temple standing upon the mountain of the diaphragm. The spleen, with its little umbrella-shaped body, collects the sun rays and has charge of the etheric body. It is this etheric body coiled within the spleen that injects the white blood corpuscles into the circulatory system. We know that the human body has been the inspiration for nearly all mechanical contrivances. Hinges are copied from the human body. See, I didn't know that. Likewise, die ball and socket joints. We are told that the very first plumbing was reproduced from the arterial and venous circulatory systems. Hundreds of machines and implements have been inspired by the subtle workings of our own vehicles, for the human body is the most marvelously constructed machine that the human mind can study. Kind of makes you wonder, like, how many, like, you think Manly P. Hall was doing some grave digging back in the day? Like, more than just this guy that he was talking about earlier? or he frequented the morgues, I would assume. The close relationship between the generative system below and the brain above, for the brain is a positive generating system, is of course due to the spine connecting them. At a certain time, a number of little doors, which now separate the brain from the generative system, are open, and the sushumna becomes an open tunnel so that every impulse is carried immediately to both ends of the body. And it is for this reason that the candidate assumes the vows of celibacy. No FAP. That's what we call it today, Manly P. Hall. For the close connection existing in the advanced disciple between the brain and the reproductive system that necessitates an absolute conservation of all life energies. I think, what's his name? Elvis Levi talks about that too in his books on magic. The tonsils are directly connected with the generative system. In fact, they are part of its positive pole in the brain. The customs of vaccinating healthy children and cutting out normal tonsils on general principles should be reconsidered. Yeah, YouTube, don't get mad at me. I'm just reading a book. Most tonsils are infected as the result of a child eating too many sweets during the first years of life. The moral is, don't cut out the tonsils, cut out the sweets. Many parents are responsible for the illness of their children. Through either ignorance or indulgence, they allow the infantile consciousness, as yet uncontrolled by its higher vehicles, to destroy itself before life fairly begins. When children are sick during the early years of life, the physician will often find the cause of the ailment in the parent, and the father or mother, not the child, should be dosed with pills. This has to be when he was old, when he got grumpy, I think. So if the stomach is kept in proper condition, the tonsils will give very little trouble. The absolute economy exhibited by nature and the building of all its structures should be sufficient proof that the Lord was not wasting his time when he made tonsils and appendixes. That don't make sense, Manly P. Hall. You just said the Lord. I thought you were a Mason. You don't believe in God. That's a joke. I'm in a weird mood tonight. So he apparently had reason for making them, but these poor, unoffending organs have become a gold mine to medical scientists who remove them at the slightest provocation, especially nowadays, right? If you got like any kind of organ that we can just take out and you'll live, like, does it hurt a little bit? Here, touch it. Does it hurt? That's it. Cut it out. You know, just in case, because, I mean, you could go home. It could get worse. So, well, let's just cut it out. Send you a bill. We are told that the vertical position assumed by the human body, which forces the contents of the intestinal tract to travel part of the time uphill, is the reason for the appendix, which is missing in creatures of horizontal carriage. Every organ not only has its visible purpose, but also has an invisible spiritual purpose. And the individual is to be admired who manages to go through life preserving intact as many as possible of his original anatomical parts and members. While on the subject of debt of science to the human body, we might add that the decimal system is the result of primitive man's counting on his fingers, whereby 10 became the unit of enumeration. The ancient cubit also was the distance between the elbow and the end of the second finger, or approximately 18 inches. So it goes back through the study of things until we find that nearly everything with which man has surrounded himself is an adaptation from the body with which God surrounds his spirit. Man is gradually gaining control not only over the organs of his body, but also over their functions. Science states that certain organ functions automatically or mechanically, they function automatically or mechanically, but occultism realizes that there is nothing mechanical about the functions of the human body. Let us take an example of a workman throwing a piece of iron among the wheels and levers of a smoothly working machine. There is a grinding crash and the machine stops. If, on the other hand, you figuratively throw a monkey wrench into the human body, it will immediately begin the process of throwing it back at you. It will surround the foreign element with a coating and try to absorb it. If this is possible, it will try to, if this is impossible, then it will try to eject it through some channel appointed for that purpose. If this means fails, it will in many cases accustom itself to the presence of the obstacle and keep right on working anyways. This shows unmistakably that the organic parts of man possess some inherent form of intelligence, and therefore they are not machines, for no mechanical device is capable of intelligence. Paracelsus, the great Swiss physician who after many years in the Far East returned to Switzerland to teach medicine, he first gave to the European world his concept of the nature spirits. He taught that the functions of nature were under the control of little creatures who were invisible to the normal senses, but who, working through the kingdoms of life, minerals, plants, and animals, and as parts of the human body, kept all of these evolving in an intelligent way. Under the control of the great celestial hierarchy of Scorpio, which has charge of all body building in nature, these elements are the invisible intelligences governing the human body and its functions. As a result of man's ever-evolving consciousness, he is acquiring more complete control over the functions of his various organs. And I'm sitting here still thinking in my mind about the machine analogy he did. There are two kinds of muscles, voluntary and involuntary. And the difference being that the voluntary muscles, which are controlled by the conscious mind of the individual, have fibers running two ways and crossing each other, while those which are involuntary are without cross fibers. The heart used to be considered an involuntary muscle, but it is now beginning to show cross fibers, thus foreshadowing the day when man will consciously and intelligently regulate the beating of his own heart. The same will be true with respect to all other organs that survive the periodic changes taking place in the constitution of man. The Eastern holy man can successfully live without his heart beating. He can stop it or start it at will. And by lifting the tongue so that it closes the air passage into the lungs, he can remain in suspended animation for months. Come on, Manly P. Hall. That might be true, I don't know. It just sounds crazy. Many Eastern Chelas or disciples do this while being given spiritual initiations out of the physical body. There are cases on record where these holy men have been buried in the ground, and weeks later when the body was dug up, it was found to be dried like leather. Water was poured onto it onto it, and after a certain lapse of time, the man who had not taken a breath in weeks just got up and walked off. This is the result of extraordinary control which the mind is capable of gaining over the functions of the body. Well, I think kind of Joe Dispenza's kind of proven that too, right? Like people are curing themselves of all kinds of stuff. Occultism teaches that there is an entire universe within the human body, that it has its worlds, its planes, and its gods and goddesses, and millions of minute cells are its inhabitants, and these tiny creatures are grouped together into kingdoms, nations, and races, and become one thing composed of many parts. The supreme ruler and God of this great world is the consciousness in man which says, I am. This consciousness picks up its universe and moves to another town, and every time it walks up and down the street, it takes 100 million solar systems with it. But because they are so infinitesimal, man cannot realize that they are actually worlds. In like manner, we are individual cells in the body of an infinite creation which is hurling itself through infinity at unknown speeds. Suns, moons, and stars are merely bones in a great skeleton composed of all the substances of the universe. Our own little lives are merely part of that infinite life throbbing and coursing through all the arteries and veins of space. But all this is so vast as to be beyond the comprehension of this little I am in us. Therefore, we may say that both extremes are equally incomprehensible. We live in a middle world between infinite greatness on one hand and infinite smallness on the other. And as we grow, our world grows also, resulting in a corresponding increase in the scope of our understanding of all these worlds. Trippy. No? Nobody want to chime in yet? I hadn't even said anything in the chat, right? So, let's see. Where they lay. What's up? Karma, Jen. We do have predators, though, that inject thoughts into our minds that is legit provable. I don't know. I must have missed y'all's conversation. The blue bomb. Yeah. You don't want to, get into that whole thing. I think we got into this book one time, and some lady that said she was a medium got pissed, and I'm like, hey, I'm just reading here. Okay, so the infernal worlds. So at the base of the spine is located the throne of the Lord of Form, commonly called Jehovah and Shiva. The linga is a symbol, and he rides the great bull of earthiness. And his daughter is death and destruction, yet he is not a thing of evil. He builds the body which give us the power to function in the lower worlds. He crystallizes them around the lines of force. Geometry is the skeleton, and all the bodies which he builds are geometric problems. Geometric angles crystallize into rocks and stones, and gradually the crystallization which brings bodies into the world causes them to become too dense and unyielding to respond to the subtle impressions from the spiritual consciousness. Slowly they turn to stone, and death is the result of the same cause that brought the body into the world. The early races of the earth worshipped the procreative attributes of life. They felt that the highest expression of life was the power of giving still another life to the world. Therefore, the principle of life-giving was personified into a deity who gave life to all things, or rather brought into manifestation the latent life which cannot grow or unfold in the physical world without the vehicle of dense substance. To the occultist, birth is death, and death is an awakening. The mystics of ancient days taught that to be born into the physical world was to enter a tomb, for no other plane of nature is so unresponsive, so limited as earth. Time and distance were prison bars, chaining the soul to narrow environments. Heat and cold tormented the soul, age deprived it of its faculties, and man's life was but a preparation for death. And as life is lived under the shadow of death, they taught that it is a mockery, a hollow thing, gilded to the careless eye, but tarnished and worm-eaten upon close examination. The physical body became the sepulchre, the tire tomb, the place of burial in which spirit lay awaiting the day of liberation, when as a virgin spark it should arise again from the broke urn of clay. Prison planet. So they were talking like prison planet stuff back then too. It was more articulate, I guess. So therefore, in all the religions of the world, we have the lower world as a black pit into which Yama, the lord of the underworld, hurls the souls of the damned to suffer in a hell of their own creation. For it is true that each race makes from its own nature the demons which torment it. No, we created our own demons? Get out of here. Here Typhon, the Egyptian god of destruction with the body of a hog and the head of a crocodile, awaits the yawning jaws to devour those who have failed to make proper use of life's opportunities. And among most people, the demon is symbolized as part animal and part human. He dwells in the animal nature of man, and those who are controlled by their appetites, their likes and dislikes, their hates and fears, need no further damnation. They have built their own hell and are experiencing its torments. Amen to that. I always said that too, and people like, life is shit. And it's like, yeah, because we made it that way. Yep. The generative system is gradually being absorbed into the brain, and the man of the next great world period will generate its progenies, or at least form vehicles for them through the larynx, which is the organ of the spoken word. When's that going to take place? We are told that a small etheric body, which will later be the organ of the positive reproduction, is gradually being built near the larynx. Ultimately, human beings will become capable of raising the spinal fire through the Sushumna canal. And this is an evolutionary process, however, covering a long period of time. We're practicing that stuff today. Although it's easier with a partner that is a spiritual person. The physical body is supposed to be under the control of the moon. I told you. Which rules the liquids of the earth. And the moon was the last incarnation of the earth spirit, and the human race passed through its state of animal consciousness in the etheric body of the moon lord. The lunar spirits are called the ancestors and are known to Christians as angels. These beings have control of the generative powers of animal and man, and the life coming to incarnation often chooses its future vehicle many years before it appears in the world. It is said that the etheric germ is placed in the body of the parent as long as 20 years before the child comes into the world. This is the result of its search for an environment especially suited to its spiritual and material needs. Damn, that's trippy. It's all a state of mind, Led Zeppelin, right on. Led Zeppelin's like one of my faves, for sure. We might get through this. Certain occult schools have taught that the spiritual consciousness of man was not fixed in any point of the body, but was in whatever part of man his thoughts dwelt. We know that there are 3 worlds where man may dwell. The first is his mental world, where he may live surrounded by his thoughts, his dreams, and his aspirations. And the second is his human world, where he may be one of the great middle class which thinks a little, eats a little, sleeps a little, and worries unceasingly. And third possible home is the animal world, where he may dwell in the midst of passions, lusts, and hates which burn his soul and consume his body, like the devil card in the tarot. The history of primitive races shows that they have risen through all of these stages, until at last a few have become truly thinking creatures. The blood of every man is individual, and when crystallizing, it forms into geometric patterns which differ with every person, so that by means of blood analysis, a far surer system could be evolved for crime detection than either the Bertillon or fingerprint systems. Well, yeah, this was obviously written a while back. We figured that one out. The story of man's soul is written in his blood. The position he occupies in evolution, his hopes and his fears, are all imprinted on the etheric forms which flow through his bloodstream. Until red blood came into the body, the spirit of man could not enter, but hovered over the body, attached to it by an electric thread. By studying crickets, grasshoppers, and similar small creatures clairvoyantly, it is possible to observe impulses from the little globes hovering over their bodies, which result in the primitive motion and sense which they demonstrate. So therefore, it is said that the actual line between the vegetable and the animal is drawn with the coming of red blood. And consequently, certain small fishes like mollusks, etc., are technically vegetables, although not recognized as such by science. The liver is the key to the red blood. Lucifer's red garments derive their color from the blood, while the word Lucifer means a carrier of light or heat, and is a name for the blood. For this reason, he is the spirit of temptation, and in the Christian mysteries, the piercing of the liver of Christ by the spear of the centurion is especially mystical, and should be paid attention to. While Prometheus, the friend of man, hanging upon the peak of Mount Caucasus, is it Caucasus? Yeah, Caucasus, with a vulture gnawing at his liver, is the same exact myth expressed in the symbolism of ancient Greece. It is further interesting to note that the relation between the words live and liver, for to have a liver is to live, actually. So along the same line, we may note that the word live spelled backwards becomes evil, and the word lived becomes devil. This peculiar relationship is found not only in English, but to a slightly less noticeable degree in several languages. When we take up this, however, we become involved in the study of Symbolism, which is the analysis of the symbolic meaning of words. Red is the color of blood and the key of the liver, and its effects upon animals is very noticeable. It irritates, excites, and in some cases actually causes animals to go mad, especially sharks. I've seen it when I lived in Daytona. And some bitches will go crazy as soon as they see blood. Therefore, it is often used in making the capes worn during bullfights. And these fighters flaunt in the bull's face, and trouble usually follows. The use of red lights is not uncommon in black magic. Evil magicians use them to materialize specters, while medical science has already discovered that red light is a strong irritant when applied to the human body. During anger and hate, the astral aura of a man becomes streaked with red flames, very closely resembling thunderbolts. And very often the base of the spine glows with a murky red light, symbolic of hate, passion, or anger. This red glow, burning eternally at the base of the spine, has given rise to the story of hellfire and damnation. But the preacher has failed to remind the laity that they carry their own hell around with them everywhere they go. It's not a place you're going to, it's inside you. The red power is said to be broken from the white light of the sun through the body of Samael, the spirit of Mars. I told you the Kabbalah was cool, man. There's all kinds of neat stuff in there you can learn. This is the cause of the red glow in the heavens. Mars is the god of war, wrangling hate and dissension. He was the patron deity of the Roman Empire, whose uniformed soldiers wore red as the symbol of his sway. And following the lead of his patron saint, they conquered the world and then fell upon the swords with which they had murdered others. While red is the color of the body, yellow is regarded as the color of the soul. And for this reason, the Buddhas and world saviors are usually symbolized as being surrounded with a golden nimbus or halo. This light is the yellow robe, also the light bearing witness to the darkness of which St. John wrote. This light, flooding through the third ventricle, represents the Shekinah of the Jews which hover over the mercy seat as a pact between God and man. And yellow is a vitalizer, a life giver, and therefore the golden-haired sun and its personification, the Christ, are both givers of life. Devitalization may be successfully treated by exposing the spleen to sunlight. Blue, which is the highest of the three primary colors, is the color given to the Father. It is a relaxing, restful color, especially valuable in the treatment of insanity and obsession. It is difficult for black magicians to function successfully in a blue light. Its affinity to the mind is very evident, and it gathers as an electric sea in the pineal gland as an extract from the spiritual qualities of human nature. The blue heart to every flame was said to symbolize the invisible Father behind the glowing sun. And in the words of Christ, quote, "He that hath seen me hath seen the Father. I am in the Father, and the Father in me," end quote. The use of colors in symbolism is very interesting. The green dragon, whom the heroes of mythology usually slay, represents the earth. The white armor is a purified physical body. The black magician is darkness and uncertainty. All colors have symbolic value, and great lessons can be learned from the study of the application of these values to occultism. While discussing the subject of occult anatomy and physiology, we must stop for a moment to give credit to the alchemists and Rosicrucians who, during the Middle Ages, concealed the study of occult anatomy by dressing up the organs of the human body in the form of retorts and alchemical vessels in their alchemical paintings. One of their great exponents said in substance, quote, "Our chemistry is not with chemicals as you know them, but with certain secret vessels," end quote, or internal organs. Also in spiritual chemicals, which are invisible to the ordinary individual. We do not believe in torturing chemicals, combining them to form gases, vapors, or seething masses. For chemicals, like men, can suffer when brought into unkind relationship with each other. The alchemical furnace was the human body. Told you that one. The fire that burned in it was at the base of the spine, and the chimney was the spinal cord up which with the vapors passed to be gathered again and distilled in the brain. And this was indeed a secret system brought to Europe from the Far East, where for centuries it has been considered the highest form of religion. We may call these occult truths by the principles of operative spirituality in contradistinction to modern religion, which is made entirely of speculative theories. People do not dream that religion is physiological, nor would they believe that their salvation depends entirely on scientific uses of the life elements and forces within their own bodies. But in spite of all that may be said to the contrary, such is the case. And during the next few years, much will be done to enlighten man concerning the secret workings of his own parts and members. And this is him saying that like a long, long time ago. Sorry about that. I thought I closed Discord. It is very interesting to note that the similitude existing between the incarnations or appearances in the world of the greater avatar, Vishnu, and the changes which take place in the human embryo previous to birth. And this brings us to our next subject, the occult embryology. Shit, we might actually get done with this thing. Okay, so this is the Occult Anatomy of Man, Part 5. The great Lord Vishnu has already come 9 times into the world to save his people. His 10th birth is yet to come. His 9 appearances closely parallel the 9 principal changes taking place in the human embryo previous to birth. Vishnu was born out of the mouth of a fish. He then rose out of the body of a turtle. And still later, he appeared as a boar, then a lion, and afterwards a monkey. And after a number of still other changes, he appeared as a man. I noted some time ago that a scientist had arranged a table showing the relationship of the human brain to various animals during the prenatal period. He followed exactly the list of incarnations of Vishnu while totally unaware that he was linking together Oriental occultism and Occidental embryology. Dude, this gets trippy every time I read it. I don't know what you guys are talking about. Talking about when you were 17 and stuff. So the cosmogony myths of nearly every nation are based upon embryology. The formation of the cosmos is said to have taken place in the same way that man is formed, only on a larger scale. For example, in the Vishnu Puranas, we are told, he put ark here, we are told that the creation took place within the womb of Mem. Space was surrounded by great mountains and cliffs, or the Corian, and the universe was created out of water and floated in a great sea, the amniotic fluid. Down a ladder, the umbilical cord, came the gods. 4 rivers flowed into the new land as told in Genesis, and these are the blood vessels of the umbilical cord. So the story goes, and a marvelous correlation exists. And someday, perhaps a new science may be based upon the law of analogy. And this will prove to be a far greater contribution to scientific data than all the scientific speculations of all ages. You sure about that? We should get Neil deGrasse Tyson on that one. It is reasonably certain that the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden is based upon embryology, and that the womb is the Oriental Garden of Eden. And in symbolism, it is represented by a dot in a circle. This dot is the primitive germ, and so on, as far as you wish to carry the analogy. And the egg of Brahma is the story of the cosmic embryo, and the embryology is the basic study of creation. In embryology, we also have a very interesting recapitulation of the passage of the human race through the various species of nature. Here we find at certain periods the Hyperborean creatures, and at another time we see the primitive Lemurian man, later the Atlantean, and finally the Aryan. We most certainly recommend to all occult students that they make a very careful study of this subject. Science knows that all life upon this planet came out of the water. The human embryo is enveloped in water through all the primitive stages of its growth, and in it we find the story of the evolution of all things. Sex did not appear upon the planet until the 3rd race, and it does not appear in the embryo until the 3rd month. The recapitulation of the human embryo through the lower kingdoms of nature is one of the strongest proofs of evolution, inasmuch as it proves conclusively that man could not have been made originally in his adult condition. Consequently, he passed through a cosmic embryology, and in fact he is still in the embryo and will not actually be born into the human race until he is truly human, which will not be for many thousands of years. He is just in the state of becoming man. Man, it's a trippy thought. So the 9 months of the prenatal epoch have been employed in symbolism for ages. 9 is called the number of man because of the 9 months that the body is in a state of preparation. The perfect number is supposed to be 12. So at the present time, man is born 3 months before he is finished. The gradual unfoldment of the human race will result in more being accomplished during the prenatal epoch, until finally birth will be the ultimate and all experience and growth will take place in the embryonic state. Ladies, can you imagine like 3 more months of that? 9's enough, right? You want to go 3 more? What's up, Dan? Good to see you, brother. Man is not born all at once. We may say that he is born by degrees, and the consciousness works outside the body, laboring with plastic substances up to the time of the quickening, when it takes hold of the vehicle from within and begins to mold a certain amount of individuality out of the materials which surround it. At the time of birth, the physical body is born and a process of crystallization sets in which never ceases for a moment until death. Man begins to die the moment he is born, and the span of his life is the length of time which this requires. At the 7th year, the vital body comes into action, and the greatest periods of growth commence. It is then that parents begin to experience difficulties. It is the time of letting clothes down and out. It is the time of letting clothes down and out. That's got to be a typo. Children shoot up like weeds, for they are literally recapitulating their plant existences, whereas before that time they were recapitulating their mineral state. At about the 7th year, the child begins to manufacture vital essences with his own body. And up to that time, he lives upon life forces secreted in the ductless glands of the throat before birth. In other words, he maintains himself upon life which he has stored away from the parent. At about 7, he starts work for himself. He is on the go every minute, and if youth could only bottle up its energy and preserve it for old age, what a wonderful world we would live in. Between 12 and 14, in the temperate zones, the liver starts activity. The emotional body is born. It is during these adolescent years that youth faces its greatest problem. Emotionalism runs riot. The consciousness is recapitulating its animal existences. It may truly be said that these are the days of puppy love. These are years often filled with great mistakes. More lives are blighted between the 14th and 21st years than any other period of life. It has been observed that the children of strongly emotional races are often brilliant and at the head of their classes until adolescence, when, however, the emotional nature becomes active at about the 14th year. These children frequently lose interest and ability in formal education. Any school teacher who has taught foreign children will vouch for this condition among certain nationalities. The moron, I think he's saying this literally, the moron is an example of the loss of mental function. Yeah, like the literal meaning of it. God damn it, come on. With the birth of the astral body. I hate when he does this because this confuses me. The moron is an example of the loss of mental function with the birth of the astral body. And there are many of these examples. During these years of emotional riot, parents must rule their children with firmness and kindness. Someone sicked flies on me. Whoever you did that, you're a bastard. Or those same children will turn someday upon their parents and blame them for their ruined lives. And I still hear people that are in like their 40s and 50s blaming their parents for their terrible lives. Yeah, my mom did it to me. It's like they don't have to grow up and take responsibility. They just keep blaming their parents. Between 18 and 21, according to climatic conditions, the mental body takes hold, and we say that the individual has reached the age of majority. He is then permitted to vote, and his father presents him with a gold watch and sends him out into the world to seek his fortune. Not one person in a million realizes why 21 is set at the age of majority, but every occultist knows the reason. The spiritual consciousness, the true I am, does not take hold of its new body until the 21st year. Up to that time, it's ruled entirely by the lower sense centers. Life thus progresses in cycles of 7 years. Damn, I just turned 42. So that just happened, right? As an example of this, we know that the 28th year is the period of second physical birth. The 35th year, the period of the second vital birth, or as it's called, the second growth, and the 42nd year, the period of second emotional birth. And during these years, people otherwise perfectly normal very often grow sentimental. Well, that explains a hell of a lot. The 49th year marks the dawn of a new period of mental activity, and the following 7 years are the golden years of thought. They are the periods of philosophic reason and the crowning years of life. And so on, cycle after cycle. If the individual waits long enough, he may pass through his second, third, and fourth childhoods. Few people realize that they are composed of mineral, plant, and animal elements. Steiner gets into this too, though. The bones are literally minerals. The hair is a plant nourished by waves of vital. I feel like I'm in freaking like Haiti right now just because I opened the door for 2 hours. The bones are literally minerals. And the hair is a plant nourished by waves of vital energy pouring out through the skin, while within every individual are thousands of little wiggling, creeping, crawling things that make each of us a zoo all by ourselves. And the ancient Scandinavians, realizing this, wrote many legends about the little creatures that live in man. A famous statue of Father Nile shows him covered over with tiny human figures representing the attributes and functions of man. Man is a great study, but we make very little use of our textbook. And the scriptures of all nations are filled with anatomical references to cities and places that have no existence outside of man himself. The 12 gates of the holy city are the 12 apertures in the human body, and like the 12 masters of wisdom and the 12 great schools of philosophy, these apertures are divided into 2 divisions of 7 and 5. There are 7 visible openings and 5 concealed openings in the human body. One of the Greek philosophers told his disciples to remember distinctly that there were 6 openings leading into the human brain, but only 1 leading out of the human head, and that 1 led from the stomach. Therefore, they were to listen twice, once with each ear, look twice, once with each eye, sense twice, once with each nostril, but to speak only once. And what they spoke would come from the stomach and the brain, and this advice still holds good. The Hebrews used the human head as a favorite symbol to express the divine attributes, calling it the great face. Like in the Zohar, yeah. The 2 eyes were correlated to the Father, for they were organs of consciousness. The 2 nostrils to the Son, because they were organs of sense and also vehicles for prana, and the life force and the ether. The mouth was used to symbolize the Holy Spirit, the one who sent forth the spoken word and formed the world. The 7 vowels to which the mouth gave birth were the 7 spirits before the throne. Also, the vials and trumpets of revelation, they were sent forth as the army of Tyre voice. What is this? They went forth as the army of Tyre voice to create in the 7 worlds, and all natural resulted from their creative power. All nature. Few realize, dude, there's so many typos in this, or I'm going blind. Few realize magnificent symbolism concealed within the human head and how it has been used in scriptural writings. Few realize it's the. Few realize the magnificent. I'm not going blind. These are real typos. It says die here. All right. I can try to, I don't know if I got time. Yeah, I could probably, I got to hurry. We'll finish this thing. So the Occult Anatomy of Man Part 6, to this work is appended a treatise which was published separately some years ago but has been out of print for some time. The treatise has a direct bearing upon the subject of anatomical symbolism, showing how principles outlined in the preceding pages work out when applied to different world problems of today. So he goes into occult masonry here, and he says, to the student of mystic masonry, one problem eternally presents itself. He knows it under many names. It is told to him in many symbols, but briefly, it may be defined as the purification and liberation of spirit and body from the bane of crystallization and materiality. In other words, he is seeking to rescue the life buried amidst the ruins of his fallen temple and restore it to its rightful place as the keynote of his spiritual arch. When studying ancient masonry, we are dealing with one of the first revelations of what we are known as the wisdom teachings. And like other great mysteries, it consists of solutions to problems of everyday existence. It may seem of little use to us now to study these ancient abstract symbols, but in time, every student will realize that the things he now casts aside as worthless are the jewels which one day he will need. Like the centaur and the zodiac, man is eternally striving to lift his human consciousness from the body of the animal, and in the 3-runged ladder of masonry, we find the 3 great steps which are necessary for this liberation. These 3 steps are the 3 grand divisions of human consciousness, and we can briefly define them as materiality, intellectuality, and spirituality. They also represent action on the lowest rung, emotion on the central, and mentality on the highest. And all human beings are lifting themselves up to God by climbing these 3 steps that lead to liberation. When we have untied these 3 manifestations into a harmonious balance, we then have the flaming triangle. The ancients declared God as the dot in the circle to be unknowable, but said that he manifested through his 3 witnesses, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And now the same is true with man. The part of God which is within each of us can manifest only through his 3 witnesses. The Father manifests through our thoughts, the Son through our emotions, and the Holy Spirit through our actions. When we balance our thoughts and our desires and our actions, we have an equilateral triangle. And when man's purified life energies radiate through these 3 witnesses, we have a halo of flame added to the triangle in the center of which is God, the unknowable and unthinkable one, the yod or the flaming letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the abyss which no one can understand but from which all things come. The life of this unknown pours outward through the triangle, which is the higher degrees, is surrounded by a halo of flame. The halo is the soul built from the transmuted thought, action, and desire, the eternal triangle of God. And among Masonic symbols is the beehive, called the symbol of industry, for it clearly demonstrates how man should cooperate with his fellow men for the mutual development of all. It also contains much deeper messages, for each living soul is a bee that travels through life and gathers the pollen of wisdom from the environments and experiences of life. And as the bee gathers the honey from the heart of the flower, so each of us should extract the spiritual nectar from each happening, each joy, and each sorrow, and incorporate it into the great beehive of experience, the soul body of man. In the same way, it is said that the spiritual energies in man eternally take the life forces he is transmuting and carry them up into the beehive in the brain, where is kept the honey or oil necessary for the sustenance of life. The ancient gods are said to have lived on nectar and not to have eaten or drunk like other men. It is quite true that honey gained or extracted from coping with the problems of everyday life is the food of the higher man. While we eat at the well-laden board, it would be well for us to consider whether or not the spiritual man is also nourished and developed by the things which we have transmuted in our own lives. An ancient philosopher once said that the bee extracts honey from the pollen of the flower, while from the same source the spider extracts poison. The problem which then confronts us is, are we bees or are we spiders? Do we transform the experiences of life into honey, or do we change them into poison? Do they lift us, or do we eternally rebel against the pricks? Many people become soured by experience, but the wise one takes the honey and builds it into the beehive of his own spiritual nature. It is well for us also to consider the grip of the lion's paw, one of the world's oldest symbols of initiation. And in ancient times, the neophyte on his way through the mysteries of Egypt's temples was finally buried in a great stone coffer for the dead, later to be raised to life again by the master initiate in his robes of blue and gold. When the candidate was thus raised, the Grand Master wore upon his arm and the hand the paw of a lion as a glove, and it was said of the newly raised disciple that he had been brought to life by the grip of the lion's paw. So the Hebrew letter yod, which is used in the center of the triangle and is sometimes a symbol of spirit because of its flame-like appearance, means, according to the Kabbalist, a hand that is stretched forth. And we understand this to symbolize the sun spirit in man, which is said to be enthroned in the sign of Leo, the Lion of Judah. And as the fruits of the fields and the seedlings are grown and developed through the sun's rays, so it is said that the crystallization of man is broken up and dispelled by the light of the spiritual sun, which raises the dead with its power and liberates the latencies of life. The spirit in man, with its eyes that see in the dark, is ever striving to lift the lower side of his own nature to union with itself. When the lower man is thus raised from materiality by the higher ideals which unfold within his own being, it is said that the spirit of light and truth is raised the candidate for initiation by the grip of the lion's paw. Consider the symbolism of the 2 Johns in the Bible, as we find them in Masonic rituals. John means ram, and the ram is symbolical of the animal passions and propensities of man. and John the Baptist dressed in the skins of animals, and these passions are untransmuted, while in John the Evangelist they have been transmuted until the vehicles and powers which they represent have become the beloved disciples of the Christ life in man. We often hear the expression riding the goat or climbing the greased pole. They don't say climbing the greased pole, at least they didn't where I was around, but they did say riding the goat. This is symbolic, important to those who have eyes to see, for when man masters his lower animal nature, he can say honestly that he is riding the goat. And if he cannot ride the goat, he cannot enter the temple of initiation. The greased pole which he must climb refers undoubtedly to the spinal column, and it is only when the consciousness of man climbs up this column into the brain that he can take the degrees of Freemasonry. The subject of the lost word should be considered as an individual problem. Man himself, that is, true principle. And there you put the true principle, may be called the lost word. But it is better to say that it is a certain something radiating from man which constitutes a password recognized by all members of the craft. When man, as the architect of his temple, abuses and destroys the life energies within himself, then the builder, having been murdered by the three lower bodies, carries with him to the tomb where he has laid the word, which is the proof of his position. Abuse of mental, physical, or spiritual powers results in the murder of energy, and when this energy is lost, man loses with it its sacred word. Our lives, our thoughts, desires, and actions are the living threefold password by which a master builder knows his kin. And when the student seeks admittance to the inner room, he must present at the temple gates the credentials of a purified body and a balanced mind. No price can buy the sacred word, no degree can bestow it. But when within ourselves the dead builder is raised to life once more, he himself speaks the word, and upon the philosopher's stone built within himself is engraved the living name of the divine. It is only when this builder is raised that the symbol of mortality can be changed into those of immortality. Our bodies are the urn containing the ashes of Hiram, and our lives are the broken pillars. Crystallization is the coffin, and disintegration is the open grave. But above all is the sprig of evergreen, promising life to those who raise the serpent power, and showing that under the debris of the temple is buried the body of the builder, who is raised, or risen, when we liberate the divine life which is locked within our material natures. There are many of these wonderful Masonic symbols handed down to us from the forgotten past, symbols whose meanings long lost have been buried beneath the mantle of materiality. The true Mason, the child of light, still cries out for liberation, and the empty throne of Egypt still waits for the king of the sun who was killed. All the world still waits for Balder the Beautiful to come to life again, or for the crucified Christ to roll away the stone and rise from the tomb of matter, bringing his own tomb with him. When a man has so lived that he can understand this wonderful problem, the great eye or center of consciousness is enabled to see out through the clean glass of a purified body. The mysteries of true Masonry, long concealed from the profane, are then understood, and the new master, donning his robes of blue and gold, follows in his footsteps of the immortals who are climbing step by step the ladder leading upward to the 7 stars. Far above the ark, the source of life, floats over the waters of oblivion on high and sends its messages down to the lower man through the cable tow. When this point is reached, the door in the G is closed forever. And he puts the G in quotations. For the dot has returned to the circle. The threefold spirit and the threefold body are linked together in the eternal seal of Solomon. And then does the cornerstone which the builder rejected become again the head of the corner, and man, the capstone long missing from the universal temple, is again in place. The daily occurrences of life are sharpening our senses and developing our faculties, and these are the tools of the craft, the mallet, the chisel, and the rule. And with these self-developed tools, we are slowly truing the rough ashlar or cube into a finished block for the universal temple. It is only then that we become initiates of the flame, for only then does the light take the place of darkness. As we wander through the vaulted chambers of our own being, we learn the meaning of the vaulted chambers of the temple, And as the initiatory ritual unfolds before our eyes, we should recognize in its own recapitulation of our own being, the unfoldment of our own consciousness, and the story of our own lives. With this thought in mind, we are able to understand not only the Atlanteans of old worshipped the rising sun, but also how the modern Mason symbolizes the sun as Hiram the Highborn, who when he rises to the top of the temple, places a golden stone upon it and raises to life all things in man. That either sounded really cool, that's the end of the manuscript, that either sounded like really cool or really insane. Like if you guys watch that movie Split, when the beast comes out and he starts saying all this stuff, you are purified by your pain. Y'all gotta watch that. That's what it sounds like. No, it's a pretty cool book, but it's just crazy, man. It's been a crazy day. Yard work, left the door open all day. I've been trying to clean this place up, and then I thought, well, we might as well get into this because I can just cut this into like one audio book and throw it up on YouTube or something. But there's way more like stuff. This is like his quick, rough, I guess. I don't know. It's really short. There's so much more you can get into this. And like if you want to really study occult symbolism in the human body, brief, that's the word I'm looking for. It's kind of like a brief introduction to it, but it's still a lot of information. Not saying any of it's true, but if I had $10 for every time he used the word recapitulation, we'd be able to turn our app back on. All right, so support the Fringe FM if you can, folks. We'll be back tomorrow night, and it's cool to see you, Dan. I just glanced up and seen you in there. Thank you guys for coming out and listening and hanging out with us. It really was cool. There's something I know I'm supposed to say, but I don't know what it is. Something I told myself like 4 times a day to talk about, and I don't know what the hell it was. And I know I'm going to think about it just as soon as I freaking hang up or end this thing. Nope. I don't know what it is. I'll remember it later, though. Good night, y'all. Sweet dreams.